Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Hada Tonight. This is our second segment. We're going to be discussing a political issue in the United States, the upcoming presidential election scheduled for November later this year. Right now, the United States are going through a phase of preliminary elections in several U.S. states at a time for the purpose of identifying, selecting the candidate that will represent the Democratic and the Republican Party. Tonight we're focusing on Hillary Clinton. She's the leading Democratic Party candidate for the U.S. presidency and her plan for the Middle East. We are joined by Professor emaad.muhanna. Assalamu alaikum, Professor. Welcome to.
Wa alaikum. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for continuing to be with us. Very timely and important discussion to help us understand the election and the campaigns of these candidates.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton seems to be doing fairly well.
Yes.
She's winning a lot of these preliminary elections in several U.S. states.
Yes.
So it looks like we'll probably, at this point, see her get the nomination, and she will face the Republican contender.
Yeah.
What about her policy? This is a very important thing for us.
I think Hillary Clinton for the Democrats is the right candidate to continue what's been started by the Democrats few elections back, starting from Bill Clinton, her husband, because we know she was the first lady, husband, the wife of Mr. Bill Clinton, who was the president of the United States, and known for his creativity in economic management of the United States. During his time, the U.S. economy obtained the highest growth rate in the history of the United States. So he's definitely a very active person. He enjoys great popularity when it comes to his participation in a lot of public works and a lot of events that basically involves the unity of the Americans. She's been part of that, and I think this is going to play on her, for her side, that basically she was part of the policy making during Clinton time. She was also the opponent or the competitor of Mr. Obama during the last election. So she's been almost in office for the past 16 years. Definitely Hillary Clinton enjoys very strong charisma, very strong woman. She knows exactly how to go about external politics, and she's been playing very, very active role in the Middle East in the past 15 to 20 years in the presence of the United States, particularly after the Gulf War. As I said, she's very strong. She knows exactly what United States needs in the Middle East. The final decision here, whether she's going to obtain the nomination of the Democrats, is still a bit early to say that, because she's got other competitors. But I think she's on the top of the list, as you mentioned. I think what is going to determine who really succeeds to be in office is the overall approach of the American citizens, where they want to be in the next 4 to 8 years. Because if we go for democratic elections again, or see a democratic president, we might see continuation of international relations building, because that's the policy of the Democrats. Build on relationship, very soft powers. But if the Americans decide to play a very aggressive role in the Middle East, whether getting involved in wars, sending out troops, then they're going to go for the Republicans. So as we said in the previous episode, it really depends on where America wants to go. Obama, they needed to settle down, make peace with a lot of nations after Bush really destroyed a lot of relationships, getting the United States involved in a lot of wars, he and his father, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, the clash with Pakistan, the wars in the Middle East. So I think they needed a time where things settle down. So whether they need to continue this peace relationship building, or they want to play an aggressive role, since that Russia started to play very active role in the Middle East, particularly in Syria.
At least not massive troop deployments that we might expect
I don't
to
think
see.
the United States will go for massive troops deployment, because we also going through the phase of a fourth and fifth generation war, which basically a proxy war. So what they basically doing is play well in the external relationship, in international relationship field, and then get their own agents basically to play the war on their behalf. So we've seen that in the Middle East, their involvement in the Middle East through the giving some powers to the Iranian after the agreement 5+1. So Iran plays a role in Yemen, plays a role in Syria, plays a role in Hezbollah on behalf of the United States. So I don't think in the next 15 to 20 years we'll see any major troops deployment at this point for the Americans. Number one, because economically it's very costly. Number two, the Americans have started to realize that they're really not getting a lot from these wars besides a lot of killing, a lot of hatred from other nations to them. So they're going to play it on their behalf, you know, deploying basically certain agents to play it.
We've seen during the Obama administration the reliance on drones and these special forces operations like the
militias.
Yes. I want to ask you about a book that Ms. Clinton wrote.
Yes.
Is it true that she in her book talks about the establishment of Daesh?
Yes, and Mrs. Clinton, in her book that was basically, you know, written 3 or 4 years back, she talked about the external politics of the United States and how they managed to actually convince a lot of partners in the Middle East and outside the Middle East to become part of the American policy enforcement. She talked about a number of areas where they got involved. They talked about a number of wars. But what really concerns us here is the involvement in the establishment of Daesh. United States, if we go back to Condoleezza Rice's statements where she talked about the creative anarchy, where we need to create some movements in that water in the Middle East to be able to get the Arabs move around and make revolutions and move out of that settlement or status quo.
This was under Bush in the 90s.
That's right. So she talked about that. So Daesh goes way back. They basically took in, and as I said earlier, it's the fourth and fifth generation war where basically you fight your own wars through others. So Daesh is basically part of it when it comes to its funding, it comes to organization, comes to marketing. A lot of it depended on United States involvement, trying to create some movements in the Middle East, particularly in the last 30 to 40 years where we, you know, there were major settlements in the area, 30 years in Egypt under Mubarak, 40 to 45 years in Libya, the same in Iraq. So Daesh was definitely a factor to play in the Middle East to basically start creating some movements.
It's a widely held view that the United States had a role to play in the creation of Daesh. The only difference that you hear when you listen to people in various governments, Middle East and beyond, is whether it was directly and purposefully or due to negligence and unwittingly creating
I would
Daesh.
say it's both, because here we've got to be honest with ourselves. Basically, the Americans want to have certain situation in the Middle East. So they use whatever is available to them, whether financial resources, human resources, corruption on our side as Arabs, weakness on our side, negligence, cultural erosion, economic situation, whatever they can see fit to help them enforce whatever they want. They use
for the purpose of
for the purpose of achieving, and that's the ultimate aim, is destabilizing the region, and in the end come out of that chaos with the resources they need. The problem here, so that's number one. They use whatever is available to them. The other factor, or the second factor, is our conditions, where we basically not seeing at all, and we know that. We know the Middle East plan, the new Middle East, and we said in a previous episode it goes back to 1907 in the meetings in England, led by the Zionist organization. So a lot of basically politics that are played in the Middle East are very clear and published everywhere. The problem here is, do we as Arabs, do we read? Do we actually learn? Do we actually remember? This is the difficulty. So I honestly can't blame them for what they do, because they use whatever they can find in terms of opportunities to achieve their goals. From our side, we've got to be very careful, always alert to basically enforce whatever we need. And remember, in a previous episode, we talked about the involvement of some Arabs in the Syrian war, and we said that's a trap. So the fact here is, it's another factor, playing on the fact that Daesh is going to be a major power in the Middle East, and you Arabs have to start moving. When the Arabs start moving, they get trapped in there, and it becomes a Daesh-Arab war, and America is just watching. So this is where we've got to be very alert.
So Ms. Clinton, she's running as a, and let's not forget, she was Secretary of State for a number of years.
That's right, that's right.
And she traveled throughout the Middle East,
Yep.
including here in Egypt. But do you expect, what exactly do you expect her policies, her foreign policies relative to the Middle East to be?
Mrs. Clinton is very economically focused, very much like Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was one of the successful presidents who managed to basically get the Palestinians and the Israelis on the same table. So he's very well spoken, enjoys very good charisma. She enjoys exactly the same factors where he basically used. That's why I say I think Bill Clinton, his history in office, will help her quite a lot, that she basically managed to absorb a lot of politics over 15 to 20 years past. So she's very experienced. I think she, as I said, she's very economically focused. She is looking at, number one, brings a lot of economic resources to the United States, particularly from the Middle East, and we know that energy is number one in the world. Number two, ensures that United States enjoys the high hand in all situations. And I think she's very focused on two main areas. Number one is the Russian expansion in the Middle East, and number two is the economic expansion of China, not just in the Far East, but in the Middle East, in Africa, and also in conquering or invading United States markets with the Chinese products. So I think she's going to be useful for the Americans if she gets in office. She's going to continue the peace-building relationship. She's going to be able to gain more time for the Israelis. And I'm talking about the success in the politics side. She's going to be able to give Israel more time, because she's able to actually get them on the same table. This is not good for us. So what I'm saying is, we discussing the topic objectively. So from their side, I think it's going to be very beneficial for the Americans. It's not going to be beneficial for the Arabs, because she's very, very well experienced when it comes to politics, on how to go about getting people together. It's going to gain more time for the Americans, for the Israelis. And when it comes to the Russian expansion militarily in the Middle East, I think she's going to be playing a very wild role in trying to control the Russian expansion in the Middle East.
I remember when Barack Obama was running for president, he got the support from Bill Clinton.
That's right.
And he spoke at that time. He was coming into office after this crisis, this global crisis in 2008. And now the situation's a bit different. Hillary Clinton undoubtedly, as you said, is going to get the support from her husband.
That's right. And from Mr. Obama and from the Democrats. As I said, I think the only advantage that plays for the benefit of the Republicans is whether the Americans want to go into war or not. If the Americans want to continue this peaceful relationship building, I think Mrs. Clinton is going to win.
What about this environment in the United States with this hostilities, Muslims being targeted, Islamic sites being killed, all this anger towards Muslims? How do you see this playing into?
Always the civil unrest or society unrest is played by politicians. And when we talked about Donald Trump, I think his statements are very, very well targeted towards aggravating the Americans against the Muslims. Which is worse, the situation now or the situation in 2001? Definitely 2001, after the collapse of the Twin Towers. But the fact here is, a very short or a minor statement from a politician can aggravate the situation. Very easily done. And I think he was doing it to gain support from the Americans against the Muslims, and take from that into the Middle East, so they can basically, the Americans can accept the fact that the Republicans can go into war.
Okay.
And send troops
that's
outside.
The question I'm asking.
So, yeah.
So it can build some kind
momentum and aggression and mobilization. Mm-hmm. That's the word.
For hostilities.
For hostilities and sending troops out. So in other words, justifying the war building, where Democrats play on justifying peace building.
Yeah.
So Americans might question, why is Obama being soft on this issue, for example, a particular issue where the Democrats can say, well, because we've got a lot of hatred from other nations towards the Americans, so we're trying to slow down. Republicans are always, before they start their period in office, they always aggravate the Americans, always play on the fact that power is number one, peace number two. So this is basically how they play it. So I think what Donald Trump was doing, besides his personality as an aggressive, arrogant person, but I think what he was trying to do is mobilize the Americans. This is what we need to do. Send troops out. Don't let the Russians control the Middle East. We're going to have to gain our own control again. Mm-hmm. So I think this is just for the sake of politics, but it will settle down.
Yeah, okay. All right, now you touched on a very important issue in the Middle East, that is Palestine.
Yeah.
We're coming out of this Islamic summit that was just held in Indonesia, in Jakarta. Yes. There was a commitment, a resolution, a Jakarta declaration. Going into this next U.S. presidency, what impact, if at all, will the resolution, the commitment to Palestine have, if at all? Do you see anything changing?
Let's say that the United States is an institutional country. It's not an individual country like what we have in the Middle East. That President A will have a policy different to President B, different to President C. United States is an institution-based country where it's a drawn long-term policy. What happens in Palestine? What is the ultimate goal they want to reach? How long is going to take each phase? So each president comes and complete his own phase. So what I'm trying to say is that whether Clinton or Donald Trump is going to be able to change how the process is set, because the process is set in the United States based on institutional requirements and resources and the long-term policy of the United States. Does the United States, in terms of long-term policy, does the United States want the Palestinian case settled? No. Because if it's settled, the Middle East is in peace, no troops be sent out, no weapons sold. So we've got to be very careful when it comes to settlement. There is no point in settling something if I'm selling weapons to them. So it's not going to happen. What is going to basically change is how you go about it. So, for example, Donald Trump might go about showing the muscles to certain parties to basically get them to the table. Mrs. Clinton might go about negotiations, visits, breaking the ice. So it's about how you go in terms of achieving your objectives, but the ultimate goal is already set by a process inside the United States. Because the United States is not governed by a president. The United States is governed by groups, and special interest groups is governed by lobbies. So it's an institution-based country, and it's the only successful political system in the world. That's the only country that runs on institutions, and because of that, it's actually very easy to expect what's going to be done. A lot of people were saying when Obama took into the office and became the president that the United States policy towards the Arabs or the Muslims is going to change.
Right.
And it never changed. Why? Because he is not the driver of politics in the United States. What drives politics in the Middle East is ideologies, processes, systems that already set in place. He just plays a role.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, got it. All right, now let's go back to Ms. Clinton, and you talked earlier about a number of things that are going to be important for the U.S. foreign policy. One of them, Russian expansion.
Yeah.
into the Middle East. How do you see Ms. Clinton dealing with that?
I think she's going to be, if she gets in an office, I think she's going to face difficulty, particularly in this area, because Putin is not an easy man to deal with. Is very intelligent, very basically can say he's a fox. He's an ex-KGB. He knows the Americans very well. And you can see that the Russian expansion during this time is very clever. Why? Because American president in the last 6 to 12 months cannot make a strategic decision such as going into war. He can't make that decision in the end of the period, which basically means that whatever Russia is going to be doing now in the next 6 months, America will not be able to respond.
U.S. is strategically asleep right now.
Exactly. So he knows that. And this is why he's taken, he's basically expanding his arms around Syria, Middle East, pressurizing Turkey, building strategic and economic relationship with the Arabs. So by the time America wakes up in the beginning of 2017, I think he would have been achieved a lot of progress on the ground.
Especially where is Syria?
Syria is the NATO situation, whether he's going to object to again interference in Libya, the relationship with Saudi Arabia, relationship with Egypt, relationship with Iran. So you're going to see a lot of movements in the next 6 to 8 months, because United States the president cannot really make a strategic decision. It's very difficult, and it has to go back to the Congress. If they're going to have to send troops out, very difficult. So I think he's playing on that, and that's why he's moving very fast. I think Western Europe is really having difficulty facing Russia without the involvement and the support of the United States. And because of that, they cannot really stand against Russia and their expansion in the Middle East. And therefore, what is going to happen if she gets in office, or Donald Trump? I think Donald Trump, if he deals with this same antagonistic approach in dealing with his own nation and external powers, I think he's going to crash with Russia. And he can't afford that, because you can't play arrogant with them. If Mrs. Clinton gets in office, I think she's going to have to cut deals with Russians. Leave here and I'll live there. And this is basically how they play it. The United States gets into Georgia to basically force Russia to withdraw from somewhere else.
Such as Crimea?
Ukraine,
the Ukrainian peninsula?
The Ukrainian peninsula, the country where they had the revolution and was basically split or going into Russia.
And Muslims there are suffering because the Russians are really frustrating their lives. I want to ask you about, at the following this recent P5+1, this nuclear deal with Iran, they have been launching these missiles.
Yep.
I just want to ask you, since we're in the Middle East, what is the aim? What is the purpose? Are they trying to antagonize, irritate, frustrate, or what kind of symbolic importance does this have?
The Iranian situation is just part of we pressurize each other, and in the end we're going to cut a deal. Look at the situation in Korea, very similar. And in the end, Korea got away with it. The situation with Israel, the situation with Cuba, the situation with Eastern Europe, or China, or India, or Japan. So what I'm trying to say is, in the end, the United States wanted to use Iran as a tool to divide the Middle East. That's why you find that Iran always steps on everybody's toes in the region. Gets their hands in Syria, gets their hands in support of Houthis in Yemen, puts a step that, on the toes of Saudi Arabia, irritates Egypt. That role that Iran is playing is basically planned by the United States. So they make them reach a point where Iran will have to cut a deal with the United States, and I will give you an agreement or a green card to continue the use of nuclear at certain standards with certain measurements, but in the end you're going to have to play a role in how the Middle East is run into the new Middle East. So what I'm trying to say is that the role that the United States was playing over the past few years is going to be replaced by the role of Iran. but basically with the mind and a brain of United States.
Now,
this is how they do it.
You talked about a different approach between whether Trump or Clinton gets into the office, one side being more heavy-handed, the other more negotiations.
That's right.
Where Iran is concerned, do you see the same type of difference?
Yes, definitely would be a difference, because one of the statements made by Donald Trump that he was objecting completely to having Iran with a nuclear program. He totally objected to that. But again, it can be just for the sake of politics, you know, that Americans will vote for him because he's a strong man and makes strong statements. So that might change. But I think Mrs. Clinton will see Iran nuclear program as a good card to pressurize the Arabs. Are you going to stand with us as Arabs, or we let our wild dog into you? So Iran will become, and my expectation is that Iran will become the wild dog, the American wild dog, where the Arabs, if you're going to behave as Arabs, we continue to control that wild dog and keep it on a leash. If you don't, we're just going to have to loosen him. And basically, you're going to find that the United States will be watching. Iran and the Arabs are basically getting into war, maybe, you know, exchange of strong statements, threatening. This is really where it's going. I think Iran is just going to be the wild dog of the Americans to enforce the American policies in the Middle East.
We have to touch on these tensions between the Gulf states and Lebanon and Hezbollah. Obviously, I mean, Hezbollah is very heavily funded by Iran. There's very strong links between the two. Anything there that you'd like to address?
Basically, when it comes to Hezbollah, it's a game. It's one of the arms. It's just an octopus. Kind of policies. Iran is a head somewhere, and the arms are everywhere. You've got an arm in Yemen, you've got an arm in Syria, you've got an arm in Lebanon, and you've got a small arm in Saudi Arabia, a small arm in Egypt, so they are everywhere. That's how they spread basically into the Middle East, and then it blows up.
Any changes now that Saudi Arabia is being
not changes at all, because
they're
trying to put pressure on Hezbollah to basically change the attitude, and gathering basically votes from the Gulf states and under the flag of the Arab League, that basically Hezbollah to be considered a terrorist organization. From that point, you're going to see a lot of tension increasing between Hezbollah and the Arabs. Again, this is going to be translated into tension in Syria, is going to be translated into a strong reaction from Iran. So I think my expectation, the Middle East will see a lot of crashes based on ethnic differences just between Sunni and Shia. And this is fueled up by United States. And you're going to have different spots in terms of Shia. You've got Iran, you've got Syria, you've got Hezbollah, and you've got Yemen. And you've got now part in Libya. Spots everywhere, and you're going to get the Arab nations basically busy, each one fighting for his own field. Egypt is fighting west, Saudi Arabia is fighting east and north, Syria and Lebanon going into Iraq. Iran is feeding into all of that.
All right, Professor, we're approaching the end of the segment. Anything else on the subject of Hillary Clinton?
I think all I wanted to say to the Arabs and Muslims, never really think that the change of any person in American presidency in the office will change how America behaves in the Middle East, how America behaves on the economic, political, or social conference. United States moves based on politics and processes that are drawn long time ago and drawn for the next 200 years. The president is just a person that changes the style. So the style that will be used by Donald Trump, slightly different to Obama, slightly different to Bill Clinton, slightly different to George W. Bush. But in the end, it's going into the same direction. So if you had Bill Clinton instead of George W. Bush, Bill Clinton would have started the war in the Middle East. So the person makes a difference. It's a policy.
So whether it's Pepsi Cola or Coca Cola, it's all cola.
Absolutely. Exactly, exactly. It's all politics. As we said, it's an institution-based policy. It's not what we have in the Middle East, where the person makes a difference. They, institutions, are the ones that drive.
Just a couple more minutes. They just informed me we have a few more minutes. I want to ask you about a recent study that was done in the United States by the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE. They did a study of 2,000 Muslim voters that participated in 6 of the primaries. And they found that the majority of the older Muslim voters supported Ms. Clinton. Younger folks, 18 to 24, were supporting Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
Despite this, the vast majority, nearly half voting for Clinton, there were, believe it or not, according to this study, there were people, Muslim voters supporting Donald Trump.
Yes.
Anything you'd like to say about this breakdown?
Yes, this is very important. I think you get a lot of Muslims or Arabs that live in the Western society are not happy with the behaviors of Muslims in the Middle East. So you find a lot of habits and traditions in Egypt that you find, you know, or in Saudi Arabia or Lebanon, anywhere. And you find that Egyptians in Europe are basically saying, well, we don't like these behaviors. So the fact here is they would support strong men, and others will support a softer
even
approach.
if the candidate is talking all these terrible things about Muslims.
Because they're not happy with what is happening in the Middle East. And you can find reason some of the youth basically were supporting the involvement of the United States to calm down and take out Mubarak. Similar situation happened in Iraq. The Iraqis were in support of Americans to take out Saddam. So the fact here is how you look at the situation. Now I like peace, for example, as an Arab. But now I can't remove that tyrant. I can't remove that you know, unjust person. So fine, Mr. Ali, come with me and we remove him. So the support here, it doesn't mean, and this is really the final point, is that my support to you doesn't mean that I believe in you. But I believe that you can do the policy or achieve the object that I wanted to do.
Back home.
Exactly. So it's not the support of any citizens to a candidate doesn't mean that he believes in him. No, he believes he can do what I want.
And also, just the number actually, they said it was 11% who supported Donald Trump. The other thing is that they represent a unique brand of people. I mean, if you have Muslims who are leaving their home countries from Africa or Asia, it's not any and everyone that can go abroad to work or study.
And also the social context and the lifestyle plays a role. So we find that people are very much religious, for example, would go for the softer president. The ones that, like youth, for example, or businessmen would go for the practical person, you know. We want, you know, final cut. So it depends on the personality, because voting is a very huge, complicated process. It's not like what we have in Egypt, you know, we're complaining about parliament, but in the end, people are complaining about parliament, but nobody actually talking about the citizens who actually voted for the parliaments. You know, if you're criticizing a candidate in parliament, but who brought him in? It was a citizen. So before you criticize the person that is not qualified to run for election, criticize the citizen, educate the citizen. So the fact here is, voting is a complicated process that, you know, depends on personal characteristics, social lifestyle, the place where I live, how I grew up. Poverty and richness plays a role.
I should mention something. Earlier you talked about the excellence of the American political system. It's not without flaws, however.
No, definitely.
There is a form of corruption called gerrymandering, redistricting. In other words, you have the elected people who are running for office who get to choose their voters rather than the voters choosing who they want to represent them.
They probably, that issue was raised here in Egypt because, for example, you're talking about 42% illiteracy rate, sorry, 39% and 42% poverty rate. So you're talking about some people can't even read, where they can basically be persuaded to vote for whoever you can't control. And this is how the bad people basically succeed. So this is it's a similar approach.
And also, I should mention to you that the participation in national elections and local elections in the U.S. is extremely low.
Yeah,
it's less than 50%.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of a lack of faith that many people have in the political system. They just don't, or they have an issue, you know, that if none of the candidates represent them, they refuse to participate.
That's right. But as I said, I think the confidence in any political system is whether it's individually based or institutionally based. Individually based, Mr. A will leave, Mr. B will come, the policy will change. This becomes worrying because I don't know who I'm with. And this is where you find people are always jumping from one party to another because it depends who's in office. But in institution-based politics are basically based on institutions. So despite the corruption that you might find, despite the difficulties or the negativity that you might find in a lot of political system, as soon as you have institutions will continue like a clock. And this is what we need to have in the Middle East, because the continuous change in individual from in the office, and these individuals make up the politics from A to Z. You're always going to have a change every 4 to 5 years. We want to move to an institution-based nations where it's just a system that is running, and the change or the difference will be in the style, but not in the actual policies.
Repressing dissent, all these kinds of repressive tactics used by the powers in our countries is the kind of thing that cripples political participation.
Absolutely, absolutely. What I said is the American system is the most successful, but it's not definitely perfect.
Right.
It's not perfect, but it's the best overall what we have, because it's easy to basically control corruption. It's easy to control how the policy is running. It's easy to control the direction where the country is going. But if you look at Egypt, for example, the politics from Nasser to Sadat to Mubarak to Morsi to Sisi, you see different directions, because it's based on individual approach, not an institutional approach. And this is what we want to move towards as Arabs.
All right. We have now reached anything else that you'd like to say?
No, I think it's definitely what we need to work on is our situation as Arabs. We need to focus more on rebuilding our cultures, rebuilding our societies based on faith, understanding, and basically support for our nations, support for our leaders, as long as they continue serving our.
Oh,
our
sorry,
nation.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask you. I realized I just didn't. Just now that I didn't ask you, who do you see winning? Assuming that Clinton and Trump get the nominations from their respective parties.
I think number one will be Hillary Clinton. I think Donald Trump will not continue. I think Sanders is Democrats. Cruz.
Ted Cruz.
Yeah. I think he's also, going to be doing well. But I don't see Mr. Trump continue.
So who's the next U.S. president?
I think Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. Because the United States needs to be to continue at least the next 4 years to settle down. And rebuild the economy, because I think the economic recession that took place in 2008, I think really hammered the United States. The United States is facing huge competition from China and India economically. So I think they need to focus more on that. Otherwise, they're going to be very militarily focused and forgetting totally about the economic.
We can't afford to be militarily
exactly,
aggressive.
without economic enforcement. So I think this is what it's going to take place. And my expectation.
All right. So thank you so much, Professor, for being with us. We look forward to looking at this over the next few weeks and months. We have reached the end of the segment discussing Hillary Clinton and the U.S. politics. We want to take a short break, inshallah, and come back to continue with segment 3 of the program. We're going to be talking with Sheikh Rayyan Arab from Saudi Arabia. He is working on a new project a new program, inshallah, for new Muslims. It's called the New Muslim Guide, inshallah. We'll be right back after a short break.